so she...
Anita, honey, she wants to talk about how did you handle close-ups in those days?
When the cameras were rolling.
Well, they just put it up close to you. You just moved up, that's how. And then
you weren't afraid of it?
No. I always photographed. Well, I even, in New York, I used to pose just up to here, just for my face and my head, for artists and so on, just for a little while. That didn't last very long because I went out to California.
Who was the man who took that beautiful photograph of you?
Which one?
The one that you said, 1 in a million, you get one of those wonderful
Yeah.
photographs. The one that Mrs. Bronson put on her table.
Yes, wait a minute. Who? Well, I think I just had that taken in New York. I mean, I had long golden hair, and I just had, this was one of my pictures, I guess, and I just showed it. And the man, I think I gave it to Mrs. Bronson, now that I remember. I think she asked me for the picture,
How
for
old
one.
were you when that picture was taken?
I think I was about 17. And I was 17 when I signed my first contract, too, because once they saw that picture, see, it's how you photograph when you were doing moving pictures. And at least that's the way it was then. And, of course, I photographed very well. And that was what put me right on the right track, because this man asked Mrs. Bronson, who is she?
Was it different when you were making silent films to understand the script, to practice for what you were going to have to do, than when you had to actually memorize lines later?
Yeah, it was easier in the beginning, and I loved it better because I loved the song, My Heart at Thy Sweet Voice from Samson and Delilah, and I would have them play that to me all the time when I had to do my scenes, you see. But once you went into talking films, you couldn't do that. In other words, you could have it for a while, but as soon as they began to shoot, then you had to stop. And in a way, that was a bit of a letdown, rather, you know what I mean? In other words, you're all up here, and then all of a sudden you're going to do the picture, and they stop the music, and you go into... But I learned, I asked for the picture, the
You had to draw on other emotions then when you didn't have the music.
Yes. But I would ask for the music anyway, and then let them turn it off when I'm ready, to do the work.
Jerry Lewis did that, He used to program the music for the day for every movie he ever did.
Oh, he
did?
To
get himself in a certain frame of mind.
Right. And it does. I mean, it's amazing. But sometimes if you play a song, even if they stop playing, you think, oh, it's going to be a letdown. But it's a little letdown, but it's also something good because you still can hear it in your mind, this song that you love. And so that's what helped me. But then they stopped, I guess, and I still went on acting.
After you had this big success, did the directors treat you with more respect?
Oh, I think so. Of course, Beaumont, we never were. He was better, and he did say one time about the second movie I made. The people had raved about my performance and this, that, and the other thing. So I was feeling great about it. And so he said, "Oh, you're beginning to believe your people, whatever they call them, fans,
Say that again. So what did he say to you?
Oh, you're beginning to believe your fans, aren't you? And I said, yeah, you are too, aren't you? So he didn't like that because he was directing these things that I was doing, see? So I came right back at him, and he never said anything like that again. From then on, he paid me a lot of respect and took me as I was, and we worked very well together, which just shows if you want to do it. I made up my mind that if he treated me right, because I talked right back to him there for a little bit. I said, yeah, you're believing yours too, aren't you, dear? And that stopped him, I think. He thought, now I'm going to get as good as I'm giving, so I think I'll keep quiet probably, because we had no more trouble that I can remember.
Do you remember whether Mayer or Thalberg set that tone? In other words, today actresses would not talk back to directors at all, and certainly after your era, they didn't talk back. Did they set that tone that the directors had to be respectful? I mean, if a fight went on between an actress and a director, would Mayer mediate it? Would Thalberg come out? How would that be handled?
Well, I don't know that it would be handled in any specific way. It might be whoever they were having business with. If Mayer was having it, then he'd probably be the one that you'd go to, or so on and so forth. If it was Thalberg, then he might be the one that you'd go to.
But I mean, were they watching a lot? Did they know what was going on?
I think they knew what was going on, yes, because I think when we were doing the one that won the Academy Award, what was the name of that? You know that, honey.
Broadway Melody.
Yeah, Broadway Melody.
When we were doing Broadway Melody.
Yeah, when we were doing Broadway Melody, I mean, Thalberg would come on the set quite a bit. He began to realize he had something, very good there, so he began coming over to watch us work. And sometimes we had to, it was hot, it was about 120. And sometimes we had to work at night because Miss Shearer, you see, who was Mrs. Thalberg, she was making a picture. And naturally, she got the day. And so we had to work at night. But it didn't hurt us. We won the award, the Academy Award for that one, I think.
What was Thalberg like?
Very nice. He was very kind. Oh, yes. I mean, he was just a dear. In fact, he's the one that said, "Oh, give the kid a chance." And I've always thought that I've always been grateful to him for that. And I thought he was just so nice. And of course, he was married to Norma Shearer, and so of course it was great for her.
What was Mayer like?
Well, Mayer he could be very charming, but he was a little more the man there in charge, and so on. Thalberg probably was just as important, but I think he worked a little differently, a little softer and so on. But of course you must remember that Mayer had a lot of people he had to deal with, and so I guess he had to have a certain, what's the word I want, a certain background that he was going to live up to, that they were going to have to do what he said or else, as it was that. And so I had a 7-year contract with him, and they took up every year, so I did fine because by the 7th year, I had made a very dear friend of Marion Davies, who you probably have heard of and know. She was wonderful to me. And in fact, she went in, they said to me when I first was there, to some young man, said, "Do you know that one of the biggest actresses in this place went in and said she wants to be just like you?" "Oh," I said, "Who is it? Who is it?" "Oh," he said, "Well, I can't tell you that," but he said she did. And later on, I found out it was Marion. She loved me.
Did you ever go to any of their famous parties?
Oh, are you kidding? I was at most of them. I mean, Marion Davies was one of the dearest friends I had. And she packed, I was sitting on a chair one day.
Someone told me that when they had parties there, they had a sarcophagus in the foyer filled with bottles of champagne, and they had pools and girls dancing nude and jumping.
Oh, come on!
Did you ever see that?
No,
never. Okay, so it wasn't like
I'm
that.
not saying it didn't happen because I didn't live.
Right.
Oh, well, I stayed there lots of times, but I didn't live there. I did go up for about 5 months one time, but I never saw anything like that.
And it wasn't as wild as everybody says.
Oh, honey, listen, they didn't serve a drink after dinner until 12 o'clock. One little drink. No, we could have 2 before dinner, and that was it. No. This was as a matter of fact, Mr. Who was the man that... Hearst. Marion used to say to me, "Honey, would you go up and tell him a joke?" And so what I would do is I'd help her out, because what would happen is, you see, people wanted to get to him, but in his business office, executive, they couldn't get there. But when they were invited to dinner, then they began to crowd in on him. Then Marion would say to me, "Honey, would you go up and tell a joke to WR?" So I just walk right in and push them aside and put a chair down. So I'd say, I'd relax, and I'd say, what did I used to call him? Wait a minute. We used to call him by his initials.
WR.
Yeah, I'd say, "WR, have you heard this one?" And I'd just push the chair aside. He'd say no, because he knew he was in on it. He knew what I was trying to do was get these people away from him so he could eat his dinner. And so he'd say, "No, honey, what?" And then I'd tell him some corny old joke, and he'd howl, and then he'd say, "Well, have you heard this one?" You see, and by that time we were moving these people back that were going to sit down and eat right on them if they could. And so in that way, I was able to help her a little bit because she'd been so wonderful to me. And, of course, nobody was as beautiful as I was, in her eyes anyway, because she argued that one of our very lovely, lovely platinum blonde that somebody liked, and she said, "Yes, but Anita's the most beautiful," or something like that. I've forgotten just what it was.
How about
Sure.
Lonte? Oh,